your dad. And, those couple years executed well. So you look great. I put on the ground.
Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. If I could ask you to take your seats, we're just going to get started in a couple minutes here. Thank you.
sing a song of long ago when things were green and moving slow. People'd stop to say hello, or they'd say hi to you. Would you like to come over for tea with the missus and me? It's a real nice way to spend the day in Dayton, Ohio, on a lazy Sunday afternoon in 1903. Let's sing a song of long ago when things could grow and days flowed quietly. The air was clean and you could see, and folks were nice to you. Would you like to come over for tea with the missus and me? It's a real nice way to spend the day in Dayton, Ohio, on a lazy Sunday afternoon in 1903.
That was Ben Butterfield, a graduate of Brentwood in '82, and a great friend of the family. And Mom and Dad saw him sing that song in concert before Dad passed, and we thought it would be special to play it today. Ben couldn't be here, but he sent that to us, and we really appreciate it. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful sunny day, so Dad did good. Thanks for being here in person. What? He would have corrected me, but that's kind of why I said it. Thanks, Allie. Thanks, everyone, for being here in person. And we have lots of people listening and watching around the world who couldn't be here in person, but they're watching virtually. So that's wonderful to have that. My name is Michael Wynne. I'm the eldest in the family, so I got the MC job. I'll be your master of ceremony for the afternoon for the formal part. And this is definitely a celebration for Dad. And, oh boy, I thought I'd be fine. There might be a few moments like this, but anyway, this has been rescheduled 3 times because, as we all know, we've been through a pandemic, and we're so glad that we were able to finally schedule it for today and for you all to be here, and that we're able to celebrate and pay tribute to Dad's life. He had a great life. Certainly was a life well lived. But you know what Dad would say right now, looking at all you? He would say, "What are you all doing here? Don't you have somewhere better to be?" No, Dad, we don't. This is where we need to be today to celebrate you. So we are here to celebrate the life of Dad. We have a wonderful program of some speakers, family, friends, colleagues, and we are going to work our way through the program, and I hope you all enjoy it. Al McKay is going to come up and start us off. So Al, you can come up. Wonderful family friend.
Thank you, Michael. We met the Wynnes back in 1970 when we were at Pioneer Pacific for the very first time, or second time, something like that. One of the things that we always do when we have a crowd in front of us is just to check your coordination, just to make sure you're okay at this point. So when my hands go like this, I want you to clap once, okay? So you just clap once if you can. If you can't, you can stomp your foot if that's easier for you. If you're not too angry, you can stomp both feet. But here we go. So that was very good over this side. This side, it was a little. Okay, so here we go. Try again. Now, I should tell you that I play drums. So we could do this all afternoon and I'd be happy. But I know that's not the purpose of the afternoon. Yeah. Anybody want to take a vote? No. I want to suggest to you that one of the reasons I'm in shorts is because I didn't play golf, but I figured with the long socks and the shorts, I might, just sort of be a little bit headed in Steve's direction at that point. So thank you for acknowledging my try. Yes, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging the fact that we're trying to do this. This time, sorry, microphone. This time, when I go this way, you tap your foot. Okay, that sounded like a stampede, so you got to try and think. It's just one sound. Much better. Now, you can't do both. You cannot do both. Okay, watch out. Woo-woo! Okay. Now, you may think that this has nothing to do with Steve or about what we're going to say, but it does, because one of the things that Steve did in the mid-'70s was to invite me here to do drum stories. One of the things that I would do is I would play my drums and I would tell stories. Some of them might be biblical stories, some of them might just be good stories to tell. And today, what I'm going to say can be summed up in about one or two sentences, but it will take me a little while to get to those one or two sentences. But right at the beginning, I can't remember who we were chatting to when we walked in and chatting to, but the idea that we're all connected came up in our conversation. And one of the things that Steve did was to help connect people. When I was with him, he really worked hard with his students to connect with his students. And not in a way that sort of is pushy or anything like that, but in this beautiful way of saying, this is my friend Al McKay, he plays the drums, he's going to tell you a story, and then there's going to be discussion, and we're going to do that now. And he would lead that. And one of the things that I'm discovering the older I get, the more I believe very strongly that we are all connected. And there may be different ways of thinking about that, and that's fair enough. So in our gathering, we are, I jump ahead, but I will go back. Some of the stuff, so I used to do these drum stories. They were a little bit like a collage, sort of all over the map. This little 4-page item is not quite all over the map, but it is, it begins with different things. And the first thing is a little one-line poem by the poet Rumi, who was a Persian, I believe, and has written many interesting poems. And the one line goes like this. Yes. Every mortal will die and will taste death, but only some will taste life. And my beginning point to say is that Steve tasted life. And we are going to be remembering his death and thinking about that. And there may be some times of grief, and there may be times when a tear will come to your eye, which is okay. I just want to let you know I did leave my drums at home today, so I won't hide behind them. But yes, this is a collage. Several reflections. Some scripture will be read and prayers. They may seem connected or not, but my hope is that they will cause you to reflect on the life and journey of Steve Wynne, and that in doing so, we will all be blessed. That there's something about the allness that was really important to Steve, that we were all part of something. So here is a prayer for friendship from a little book called Prayers Plainly Spoken. Stanley Hauerwas was the author of that particular little book. Loving Lord, where would we be without friends? Just ponder that for a moment. Where would you be without friends? We would literally be no place, alone in your creation, yet unable to recognize it as creation. It would just be another lonely place. But you place us next to one another. So just take a quick look. Who are you placed beside? You may know them, you may not know them, but who are you placed beside? And being so placed, we are forced to recognize that others exist. This world is not just about me. And this celebration is just not about only Steve. But it's all the different tentacles that go out from who Steve was as a teacher, as a husband, as a dad. And just in the way that, again, we are connected. That sounds very hard in the sense that we're all somehow connected. But at the same time, it is a great consolation. Leaving the gap unfulfilled preserves the boundaries between us. It is nonsense to say, and this is, it is nonsense to say, some people would say, that God fills the gap. How does he keep it empty? Because right now, some of us have a gap where Steve was. And we would like to fill that gap. And of course, the author, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who wrote this particular quote, was talking about the fact that the gap actually allowed for other experiences. And for some of you, and I know for me, many times in these situations, there's pain. There's the pain of knowing that you're not going to be able to just go have a cup of coffee with the person. You can't have another conversation in the same way that you did. So, God does walk with us through this, though, not taking away the pain and not trying to fill the gap. So into our grieving, we weave. The strength of the Father, into our grieving, we weave. The compassion of the Son, into our grieving, we weave. We weave the comfort of the Spirit into our grieving. We receive the presence of the three in one. Into our anger, we invite the patience of the Father. Into our numbness, we invite the healing of the Son. Into our confusion, we invite the wisdom of the Spirit. And we shall grieve together, we in community with the three in one. So my first point that I would want to underline really carefully and clearly for you is that we are not alone in these situations. That there is the Creator God who is with us as we are in these situations. This is a reading out of Isaiah 25 from the Message. Here on this mountain, God of the angel armies will throw a feast for all the peoples of the world. A feast of the finest foods, a feast with vintage wines, a feast of 7 courses, a feast lavish with gourmet desserts. Steve, I think, would be at that table. And here on this mountain, God will banish the pall of doom hanging over all peoples, the shadow of doom darkening all nations. Yes, he'll banish death forever, and God will wipe the tears from every face. He'll remove every sign of disgrace from his people wherever they are. Yes, God says so. And at that time, people will say, look at what's happened. This is our God. We waited for him, and he showed up and saved us. This God, the one we waited for, let's celebrate. Sing the joys of his salvation. God's hand rests on this mountain. Steve really encouraged me, especially that first time I came to, let me just think for 1 second. I don't want to really insult you by saying the school that's on the other side of the island, but to this wonderful place called, everybody? What was that? Brentwood College, right. Thank you. Your dad would often save me just like that, too. That's good. During our time on earth, we celebrate and we mourn. And between, we live day to day, discovering what it means to be human. This poem by Hafiz is called Becoming Human. Once, a man came to me and spoke for hours about his great vision of God. He felt he was having this great vision he was having. He asked me for confirmation, saying, "Are these wondrous dreams true?" He replied, "How many goats do you have?" He looked surprised and said, "I'm speaking of sublime visions, and you ask about goats?" And I spoke again, saying, "Yes, brother, how many do you have?" "Well, Hafiz, I have 62. "And how many rose bushes in your garden? How many children do you have? Are your parents still alive? Do you feed the birds in winter?" Remember that line. Do you feed the birds in winter? And to all he said, he answered and gave those answers. Then I said, "You asked me if I thought your visions true. I would say that they were if they make you become more human, more kind to every creature, and more kind to every plant that you know. May we all seek to become more human." And echoing the spirit of Hafiz and Rumi, we have these words from a note that Steve left on Olivia's pillow at the end of one of his visits. So these words are from Steve, and they were for Olivia. "Be good to all those around you. Stay healthy. Work on your fitness. Develop your wonderful skills. Enjoy your excellent Sunday school. Work hard at your studies. Help your classmates who may be struggling. Don't forget to feed the birds. Help mom and dad around the house and garden. Above all," now listen to this one, "above all, be yourself. Love Nana and Papa." So we began this time of blessing with words from the poet Rumi. I learned that every mortal will taste death, but only some will taste life. My prayer is that those of us gathered today will mourn well, and we touch something of the mystery of grief through Steve's death. But may we also hold space for remembering how we knew Steve and experienced his life well lived. May we all be blessed. May we all taste life, especially in these few moments that we all have together here as we remember Steve and as we remember each other.
Thanks, Al. Ali, are you going to read? Oh, Frank. Okay. Frank. This is my Uncle Frank, Dad's brother.
Great to see so many people here. It's a reflection of how Steve touched so many lives. Thank you for coming. Sorry. I'm a little taller than the previous speaker. So I want to just say that I'm very, very important to this family. And important today because I had a former college football player run interference for me till I got up here. Steve was a great guy. Let's hope I can read this. My brother Steve entered the world February the 19th, 1938. According to our parents, Irene and Steve Wynne, he weighed in at 2.5 pounds. Some people don't know that. And I was born 3 years later. I entered the scene, and many years later, I learned that my mother had another son, born after Steve, who was a stillborn. Steve was a born leader from birth, and I must say, a bit of an entrepreneur. My dad was in the military and served in North Africa and Italy. During that time, our house was bombed by a stray German bomb meant for the dockyard a few miles away. Why he picked our house, I have no idea. Our family moved to my grandmother's house a few streets away, Willow Home Street. It had terrace houses. And at the end of that street was a neighborhood pub. Steve used to spend a lot of time down there, but he wasn't drinking, as far as I know. But Willow Home Street, they had the terrace houses. At the end of the street, the neighborhood pub, and the Ambassador Theatre, where we watched Roy Rogers and people like that there. I'm old, and you know, there's a guy in this audience today that actually insulted me a few years ago by saying, I think it was St. Patrick's Day, and he said, you know, Frank, you are so old that when the Dead Sea was only sick when you were born. And he's in the audience. I won't mention who it is. All right? I won't embarrass him. So anyway, Steve was about 6-year-old, and I was 3-year-old when he started making money off us kids. He would go down to the pub and gather up corks from the beer bottles, bring them home, and place a small stick in them, and sell them to us as pipes for a penny. Later on, he sold me a dodgy car as well. After the war ended, and our dad came home, we moved to a better area of Belfast, Orangefield, where the government provided our family and many other families who had also lost their homes with prefabricated bungalows. They were actually made of asbestos, believe it or not. The street was called Houston Park. Steve and I attended the primary school there, and both of us at different times played on the school soccer team. We had a large playing field at the rear of our home and made full use of it, especially in the summertime. We would play a lot of cricket and other games there. When Steve reached the age of 11, he passed an exam called the 11 Plus. or the qualifying, and earned a place at Cabin Hill Grammar School. On the other hand, I failed the 11 plus and attended Ashfield Secondary School, where I graduated, believe it or not. This was the beginning of a separate journey for Steve and myself. Steve moved from Cabin Hill to Campbell College. I remember he would come home from school and would take me out to the playing fields. And he would spend hours teaching me the rudiments of rugby. At Ashfield, I played rugby at the medallion level. However, I excelled at cricket as a fast bowler. And there's someone here, Hard Martin, that can testify to that. Is that right? I played for Cowichan for 14 years, yeah. Anyway, Steve's journey then moved to Queen's University, Belfast, and our paths became wider. Steve was born to be a teacher, right from his humble birth at 2.5 pounds. He was what we now call an overcomer, and a great example of an overcomer. We moved again to an even nicer location in Belfast, Cherry Valley Gardens. And I keep telling my wife, I come from an upper middle class. Sorry. We lived in a semi-detached home with a garden back in front. Steve joined the Queen's University Flying Squadron, where he flew a plane called Chipmunk, a pilot training plane. And he used to fly over our back garden and wave his wings, and we knew it was him. It was at Queen's where he became an accomplished cross-country runner, winning his athletic blue, which is a very high honor at university. Our family always watched his feats of endurance in the races. I was always inspired by his courage and determination. We watched one race where he made a jump over a stream only to be spiked on his calf muscle by a following runner. When he finished the race, blood was leaking from his calf. He was responsible for, He was responsible for encouraging me to get involved in cross-country running. And I used to throw up before every race. Wasn't my thing. In my late teens, but I never achieved the status that he did. So Steve became a dedicated teacher, and with June at his side, a loving and dedicated father and great family. Although we took different journeys, I was always inspired by my brother. His courage and determination to overcome many obstacles of life. He touched the lives of many people, hence there's so many people here. He was a devout Christian, and his strong relationship with our Lord reached many people, including his students. He was involved with an InterVarsity group at Brentwood, which I am sure helped to change many lives. Our lives were very different, however. During his last big challenge, we became very close again, and he shared some stories I had never heard before. He fought a battle with cancer, knowing that this was one race he wasn't going to win. The trouble is, there we go. This was one race that he couldn't win. However, he fought with the same courage and determination that he showed when competing in athletic events. He would finish the course. I just want to conclude with a quote from Isaiah. I thought Al was going to steal this from me, but he didn't. Isaiah 40, 29 to 31. This is a familiar verse of Scripture that appeared in a movie called, what was it called? Chariots of Fire, that's right. He gives strength. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Sorry. You told me we would have moments like that, right? You know what? They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I always referred to Steve when I was talking to people that I referred to him as Mr. Chips. If you've ever seen the movie Mr. Chips, Steve was dedicated to teaching and dedicated to Brentwood completely. So I would refer to him as Mr. Chips, my brother Mr. Chips. So I just want to say goodbye, Mr. Chips. Thank you.
Waiting to see you all from up here. Thank you so much for being here. I know Dad would much rather be on the golf course and wouldn't want to be the center of attention, but like Mike said, he tried to wiggle out of it twice, and here we are. There are lots of people that couldn't be here today that really would love to be, and just a little shout out to our family and friends all over the world, actually, New Zealand and Northern Ireland and England and different places, and we're so happy that they can actually be here live with us and that we can capture this and replay it for Mom in the days to come as well. So thank you for that. Mom's youngest sister, Ruth, has sent something for me to read. Uncle Frank got me teary. So Ruth writes, I first met Steve as an 11 or 12-year-old. Younger than you, Olivia. Being the afterthought, born 10 years after June, I really only got to know June when she came home from university or I went up to Belfast to stay with her. It felt great to have a big, older sister who made clothes for my dolls as Christmas presents. What excitement when she came home and when she brought Steve home. I had another big brother. That's how I felt about Steve. I remember going to Belfast by train as a young girl and Steve meeting me and driving me through Belfast on the back of his moped. I'm sure Grandma loved that. No helmets or anything, she says. I still remember how wonderful it was to feel the wind whipping my hair as I held on to Steve, feeling very grown up. Steve and June took me to my first ballet. Wonderful experience and the beginning of my love for ballet. In my rather quiet, lonely home life, everyone had left her, with my siblings all away at uni, to be a bridesmaid at June and Steve's wedding was so thrilling for a 14-year-old. Meeting all their friends and walking down the aisle and steps of the church in Londonderry on the arm of their good friend, John Neal. Wow. And John's watching also. Certainly, Steve added a new dimension to my life, as a growing girl and as a young woman. With their family growing, when Colin and I were married, they all played a big part in our wedding. Mike was a page boy, and I was a 2-year-old flower girl who apparently back then wasn't too keen on having my photo taken. When 18 months later, Carolyn, Ruth's oldest, was born, Ruth says, I couldn't wait to introduce her to her Auntie June and her Uncle Stevie. So when she was just a year old, we spent Christmas with the family in Calgary, skating on the frozen river and being introduced to cross-country skiing. Years went by, and maybe one of my most memorable holidays as the children were growing up was a 3-week holiday with June and Steve and their family back in 1986. It was our first big holiday outside of England, and what a holiday. Expo 86, Long Beach, trips in the camper van, out in their boat, visiting friends by a lakeside, admiring the wonderful murals in Chemainus. So many great experiences. Paul has a saying, that's her son. Guests are like fish. They go off after 3 days. But not in this case. Steve made life fun, giving blonde-haired Paul the nickname Boris after the young tennis player Boris Becker, who took Wimbledon by storm that year. Allie took 9-year-old Naomi under her wing and made her feel special. When Carolyn decided she'd like to spend a gap year at Capernwray Bible School on Thetis Island, Steve and June took on the role of parents. And that gave us great peace of mind knowing they were nearby and someone Carolyn could visit or turn to if she needed to. There have been many other significant holidays together, and of course, when June and Steve holiday in England or Ireland, they always spend a few days with us in Winchester or Wincanton in Somerset, enjoying our beautiful southwest coastline. Steve even gave his approval of the home that we live in now in retirement. When June and I had significant birthdays to celebrate, like our 60th and 70th, you were together and we spent the week together. The last one was 4 years ago at Mom's 80th, and a week that Auntie Ruth treasures. Even though Steve was suffering and had oncology appointments that year and knew that his time on earth was running out, he made that week so special for all of us. We visited Victoria, Butchert Gardens, and some of his favorite places. But back home, he shared one of his concerns. What would happen to June when he's gone? He wasn't afraid of death. He knew his Lord and Savior, Jesus. Steve had put his trust in God and lived his life to the full, honoring the one who loved him and had given his life so that death was beaten and eternal life in God's presence would be his. Andrea, Allison, and Mike, your dad need not have been concerned. For you and your families and their many friends, in spite of COVID, have ensured that June has been and is being well looked after. We are so grateful to you all for this. I am just so grateful to have had Steve as my brother-in-law and a great uncle to my children. Absolutely the best. Thanks, Auntie Ruth.
Good job, Allie. I did the same thing when I read it in the privacy of my own home. We have a hymn now to sing, and I believe you have the first and fourth. We are going to do the first and fourth verses. If anyone needs the words, Andrea has extra copies. Do we have music? we have music? He has the music? Okay. A favorite of Dad's as well as Mom. He heard you, Mom. All right. Someone very special in our family is going to come up and say a few words next. We've always called her my nanny, but I like to call her now my au pair. So Rosie is a great friend of the family, as I said, very special to all of us. She will probably tell you how she is connected to our family, and me in particular. And so, Rosie, come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. And special love and hugs to you, June, and your beautiful family. For those of you who may not know, my name is Rosalind Jack, and it was Rosalind Ellis back in the day. As a longtime friend of Steve, June, Mike, Allison, and Andrea, I am so very honored to be here with you today, taking part in this memorial and tribute to such a special person, a celebration of Steve's life. You will all have your own unique memories of Steve Wynne. But for myself, I first met Steve and June and Mikey in the mid-1960s. I was a freshman at a small rural high school on the prairies just outside of Calgary called Chestermere Lake High. I'm not sure what these two young school teachers from Northern Ireland thought of this seemingly dry, hot, flat, treeless, and somewhat desolate community when they arrived, especially because the lake was in fact a little more than a slough at the time. But what I do remember was the excitement that September long ago, as the students were awaiting the arrival of several new teachers from the British Isles. What would it be like, we wondered? How strict would they be? Would we be able to understand their accents? Well, Steve and June blew in with an energy and freshness we had not expected or ever seen before. I know that the students that took part in their classes have very fond memories of those 3 or so years of high school, thanks to Steve Wynne. It took almost no time at all before he had endeared himself to us. At the ripe old age of about 25, we thought him to be very mature. This young man managed to instill a whole new interest in learning and enjoying it. He was strict, but his impish wit and infectious laugh always took away the sting. We actually felt respected. What I loved was that he never seemed to lose the ability to seize the day, and that in itself seemed almost contagious. Everything was a great adventure, and he never expected more from us than our best effort, but he made that easy to do. Personally, he was the one person in my life at the time who instilled a sense of self-confidence that I totally lacked. Although he was never able to teach me to spell, that was his shortcoming at the time as a teacher. He instilled in me an interest in writing and photography, a love of the ocean and geography, and travel, and of course, golf. As my senior year was coming to an end and Stephen, June, and Mike were making plans to travel to New Zealand to teach school for a year, I was ecstatic when they asked if I would join them. They would need a nanny for Michael so that they could both teach. But of course, I would be just part of the family. And soon my nickname became Abigail. Well, my parents said yes, and off we went to the West Coast to board the SS Oriental for a 2-week crossing of the Pacific Ocean. I had never even seen the ocean before, and Steve was terribly amused that I was totally offended, or more disgusted, with the odors that abound in the San Francisco harbor, which was our first port of call. Now, I was a prairie child, remember that. There were camping trips and long road trips and no end of adventure over the course of the year. And by then, I loved the ocean as much as they did. At the end of that incredible year of growth and introspection, thanks to the winds, I returned to Alberta while Steve and June continued with their travels to Australia and much of the Far East, returning to Ireland, where they purchased a home and put down roots. But it wasn't meant to be, and after being gone for so long, the transition was more difficult than they had anticipated. They returned to the Canadian prairies, of all things, and with Michael and their new baby girl, Allison, and Andrea close behind, it completed their family. These 3 little munchkins were Steve's absolute pride and joy. But the sea would call again, and so a position opened at Brentwood College, here on the island. Steve applied, and of course, was accepted. You know the rest of the story. We have remained close and have kept in touch all these years. In 1968, I married an Alberta cowboy and had 2 children of my own, ranching in the foothills of southern Alberta. When Mike was 15, he spent a summer with us at the ranch. He teases me that he was a victim of child labor, but it was a very, very special time and reunion for me. Steve was an icon in my life and remained so until his passing. He and June influenced me in every possible way during my life as a student and a young woman. I give them much credit for all that is best in me. Steve, I will always remember your mischievous smile, your infectious laughter, your teasing manner, your loyalty, and your strong, never-failing faith. Your battle with cancer was nothing short of heroic. You have left us with beautiful memories. Farewell, my dear friend.
We're now going to show a shortened version of a video that my dad did. It was an interview as, what do you call it, staff emeritus? Emeritus. It was an interview that he did as well as other staff members, and he was just talking about how impactful Brentwood was, how much he enjoyed it, and the video will speak for itself, and we wanted to play that now.
So I came back in '73 and to Ellis House to look after 66 boys. Every room was filled. They came from all over the place, most of them actually from the United States. June was the housemaster's wife, who probably had more to do with the boys than I did, because they were knocking on her door all the time, asking for this and asking for that and whatnot. And it was a lifestyle that I adopted very quickly. And there were occasions when I suggested to my wife that I was surprised I was being paid to do what I was doing, because I would have done it free. That didn't go down very well. So many of these students over the years became lifelong friends, and some of them are on the Board of Governors, and I meet with them whenever they come out for their meetings, which is amazing when you go back that many years. So that basically is how I came to be at the college in the first place, and how I became a housemaster early on, and I have never looked back since. And I joke and say that when they asked me, what did you teach? My answer often was, well, I taught field hockey and rugby and soccer and cross-country running and track. No, what did you teach? Oh, I see. Well, I enjoyed my time on the fields, but I also enjoyed teaching geography and English and social studies and law through the program while I was at the school. But a lot of my time was in fact spent outside of the classroom, and that's what the students remember when they come back and talk to me.
John Allpress unfortunately couldn't be here today. He's feeling a little under the weather. Howard Martin has agreed to give his remarks on John's behalf. So, Howard / Pinch.
Sorry, that better? I don't have a New Zealand accent, I'm afraid, but I will read what John wrote, sent to me a couple of days ago, some lovely words, and if you'll excuse me, I will interject, put in one or two of my little stories that relate to what John has said. So he starts, "Let me begin by thanking June, Andrea, Alison, and Mike for this opportunity to share a few memories of Steve as a colleague. Many would have jumped at the chance to rekindle a few stories, for this colourful character left us with a ton of material. Steve made us laugh. Not all of us at the same time. Indeed, there were times when Steve would have us howling with laughter, and he wasn't. He could also muster a rare blend of Irish logic when the occasion called for it. At a gathering such as this, many years ago now, for Derek Hidley at Shawnigan Chapel, the chapel was packed, and as we left, Steve commented he was unlikely to attract such a crowd. And suggested, how about I come to your funeral if you'll come to mine? I can remember a little bit of a logic too, Irish logic, I guess it was. He was talking about one of the players in his rugby team, the Fighting Fifths, which is a senior team, but not the most talented of players, I guess. And he was one of the players in the scrum was very slow moving about the field. And he said, when the scrum gets over there, you're not there, you're still running to catch them up. He says, and when you get there, they're gone. The Wynnes have almost always had a dog, and when I, John, arrived, it was Barney, a mixed breed, who had the size of a Great Dane with the physical build and energy of a boxer. A big barrel-chested guy who looked a bit intimidating, but he wouldn't hurt a flea. However, the students didn't know that. Whenever Steve was on school duty, so was Barney, and rarely on a leash. Barney had a great nose and quickly learned to discern fresh tracks. He would dive down side trails and flush out alarmed students who were off for a cigarette or a bit of canoodling. Steve would greet them as they reappeared. Steve shared an office with two fellow geography teachers, Victor Roney and Howard Martin. On Thursdays, after retiring as housemaster, Steve supervised prep in Ellis House, his old house, I in Rogers, and if my memory serves me right, he says Victor was in Privet, which would have been true. On one particular Thursday, Steve was also on school duty, after which he popped back to Ellis to do something in the evening. Around 10:15 p.m., Howard headed back to the office. It was unusually dark, but it was always dark down there. He had folders in one arm. Heaven knows, I don't remember that. Unlocked the door with the other, and as he reached for the light switch, Barney leapt out of the darkness, put one paw on each of Howard's shoulders, and gave him a delicate lick. Now, I'm going to add my little story about offices. Before the three of us were together, Steve and I had an office. We were allocated an office up in the old solarium building, the old ivy-covered building. There was a little room, probably a dorm at one time, up in the attic. And we put 2 desks in, two chairs, and that was about it. There was a little window that wouldn't open. It was dark. Oh, it was a pretty grim looking place. But then Steve says, "Oh, I've got to get my couch in here." I said, Steve, you can't get a couch in. We're packed out already." "Oh, yes, we can." Oh, he was always an optimist. He brought this couch along. I said, "Well, it won't fit, Steve." Oh, I said, "Well, look." He opened the door, and he said, "We can stand it up on end. Then we can get in, shut the door, and then put it down again." I said, "Steve, you can't get out, and I can't get in." But that's what he did. We weren't there very long. He used to, he did use this couch. He used to have, the odd afternoon, he would lie down and relax, go to his top drawer in his desk where he always kept chocolate biscuits and chocolate, and he'd eat that. And nobody could get in because the couch was down. That didn't last very long because the place caught on fire. The top, not from our office actually, but it burned the top of the attic, the roof line of, was that 1984, 85 that happened, I think? Somewhere around there. Back to John Allpress. Years later, when the Wynnes were living beyond the marina, there was a brief window when they were dogless. Pat Dawson, the newly appointed head of school at Crofton House, decided that their son Ryan should complete his education at Brentwood. But there was one problem. Ryan loved his Cocker Spaniel, Mickey. Pat and her husband downsized to a condo in Vancouver where pets were not allowed. Could we place the dog too so Ryan could visit Mickey? Steve didn't hesitate, understanding a boy's love for his dog. I guess the family would remember that dog, would you? Yeah. I never observed Steve teach in the classroom setting, although I followed him from time to time, so I can speak to his meticulous, unique script writing and the freehand maps that he would annotate and leave on the board, which I often admired before erasing. I know a lot about his maps too, trying to follow some of his cross-country routes. Oh. I saw a lot of South Vancouver Island. I did, however, watch him teach an impromptu lesson on a ski trip in New Zealand in the Canadian summer of 1982, and I've never forgotten it. We were at Mount Cook National Park. For those of you who do not know New Zealand, let me set the scene. Park headquarters is at 2,000 feet. And if the weather cooperates, Mount Cook, which is now called Aoraki, which in Maori means cloud piercer, rises spectacularly 12,200 feet above the Tasman and Hooker valleys, surrounded by glaciers and icefalls coming off Aoraki. There were several of Steve's Geography 12 students in the group. We headed up the Hooker Valley, taking height quite quickly. As the students started to tire, he rested them and started to pepper them with questions about various features looking down the valley. The 27-kilometer Tasman Glacier was still advancing at that time. It took a while before one of his students asked, "Is this a terminal moraine we are climbing?" Then, for those not in his geography class, myself included, Steve defined the terms he was using. There were features to be observed in every direction we looked, hanging valleys where one glacier intersected a lesser icefall. There was so much happening in front of us, with the ice cracking and falling in the warmth of the morning sun and small avalanches rolling off the Caroline face, adding to the sound effects. My eyes were wide open. My eyes were wide open, taking in everything Steve was saying, but my mind was in a national park 200 miles to the north where I had grown up. John came from a place called Nelson on the north end of South Island of New Zealand. The glaciers were long gone, and pristine beech forest disguised the signs of their influence. For the first time, listening to Steve, an Irishman transplanted in my country, I finally understood the physical geography of the valleys, rivers, mountains, and lakes I knew so well. His descriptions were superb and infectious, and his infectious enthusiasm had us all engaged. Yes, Steve could teach. He was a man of many parts, but if I had to capture him in a single word, it would be fellowship. Steve loved fellowship. He was a competitive, long-distance athlete who for years ran our cross-country group in the second term. In fact, Frank pointed out he was a very accomplished competitive runner when he was at Queen's University in Belfast, and I know occasionally he used to tell me about some of the British university competitions that he was in, but he never bragged. I have no idea how well he did in them. I imagine pretty well. He loved running up hills. He was incredible. He was like a gazelle. I hated hills. I used to go with him, on some of these cross-country runs, but he'd want to run up out of Goldstream and things like that. He was very good. His Long Beach trips were legendary. Long runs on the Tofino Beach, followed by barbecues. It was all about running, but in equal measure, it was fellowship. Now, I will tell you, it was one of the Long Beach trips, I went on to Tofino with him, and Steve, first morning, we go out, it was a lovely day, start running along the beach, Long Beach, and much like Chariots of Fire, it looked all wonderful as we were going along, this undulating beach. But as we ran along this ridge, there was water on both sides of us. And the tide was coming in, and we kept running, and this sandbar that we were now on was getting smaller. And I said, Steve, we're not going to get out of here, Look, we've got to get back to the land. Oh, it's all right, you know what he used to say. Always the optimist. Anyway, one or two of us, the shorter ones, who couldn't swim too well, decided we were going to get back to land safely. Jamie Allard was one of the boys I remember going back we waded through water chest high to get back out. A few more minutes and I'd have been gone. And then we get back, there was no problem. Never was a problem. There was another, if you don't mind me, another run. When he took the normal running groups on a second term, he would go all over the areas. And there was one time we went up to the hills by Glenora, which are sort of northwest of Duncan, pretty remote area. We went up there February, overcast, rather damp and cold. And one of the boys that had just joined us was a boy from Korea. He'd joined the school in January, so he'd only been at the school 4 weeks. Didn't speak very good English, but somehow finished up in Steve's group. So we do this run, following his map, and we come back and we do the head count when we all arrive back. The Korean lad is missing. Oh, he'll get back to school, he said. Don't worry about it. We got back to the school bus, and the bus was going to take us the final 7 miles back to school from Glenora area. He said, "Oh, you go." I said, "Steve, we can't just abandon him. We've got to search, see if he's there." So I said, "Look, we did this circular route. You take some people that way. I'll take some this way, and we'll go around and we'll meet, and then we will have covered the whole course. We'll find him that way if he's got lost on the way." Well, of course, we went round. We met up. The The two groups met up, no sign of this Korean boy. And so I was really getting worried. Oh, my goodness, we've lost this lad. What's going to happen? Steve, oh, it'll be all right. Don't worry. You know, I expect what he'll do, he'll find a farmhouse, knock on the door, and ask them to phone the school to tell him the problem. I said, Steve, he's Korean. He hardly speaks English. I don't think there are any farmhouses around here, let alone any doors to knock on. Anyway, we got back to the bus. This is in the days before anyone, even the bus driver, we didn't have cell phones. There was no contact with the school. We got to 8 o'clock. Well, what do? We went back to school. And this lad had been back 3 or 4 hours. He'd found his way down to the Trans-Canada Highway somewhere, went into a gas station, asked the manager there to phone the school, and the school sent out a driver and car for this boy, and he was back in school having dinner. 5:30. We were at 8 o'clock, still running around the hills up there looking for him. See, and Steve says, yeah, it was all right, wasn't it? No problem. He was right. It wasn't the only occasion something like that happened, but it always turned out right. He was a man of faith, as John comments here in the next paragraph. Steve was a man of faith. For years, Steve and June sponsored our InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in their home. It was popular. There was food and mixed company. It was about faith, but in equal measure, it was about the fellowship. We often asked Steve to say grace, and he was so good at it. His standard 5-word entry was, Heavenly Father, we give thanks, and off he would go. Be it rugby, deck club dinner, a faculty end-of-year dinner, or an alum banquet at class reunions. Steve would highlight the purpose that brought us together and the fellowship that bound us. Besides the cross country, Steve and I also used to coach field hockey, boys, in the summer term. And in 1985, we went on the first field hockey tour for boys to Barbados. We packed the bags, went via Toronto, down to Barbados. And when we got to Barbados, he opened up his luggage, which seemed to be massive. His luggage with the clothes in, 2/3 of it was a duffel coat. I said, Steve, why did you bring a duffel coat? We're only a few miles north of the equator. Well, he says, you never know. He took several more trips down to Barbados, not with me, on his own. Became very much attached to it, knew people down there, got to know them very well indeed. I don't think he ever took his duffel coat again, though. There was our final walk. I'm back to John. There was our final walk. Steve had the route all planned. We drove 2 minutes from their home in Arbutus Ridge to eliminate from the Arbutus Ridge Community Center to eliminate the hill. He knew he didn't have long. The conversation was wide-ranging. He was so grateful to the staff at Cowichan Hospital, the doctors and nurses for their extraordinary care and kindness. We rested on the bench by the third tee, where he spoke of family, each of you. He was so proud of all your accomplishments. We must have watched 4 groups tee off there. Steve was so at peace, and in some ways spoke as if he was already in another place. He knew where he was going. A devoted family man, a loyal colleague, and a steadfast friend, Steve has been greatly missed, and he will always have a special place in the heart of this Kiwi. Farewell, old friend. I'd like to say that Steve was a wonderful friend and colleague. For my part, I knew him for nearly 50 years. He was such an optimist, incredible, and a positive force to everyone that knew him. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. This is about as technical as I get. Bear with me for a moment. This is not my speech. Another influential and dear family to the Wynnes was the Carr family. And Leslie is here representing the family because they're all over in England attending Royal Henley this week. I did see Rory and Brian when I arrived for a few days, and it was great to visit with them, and they send their apologies, obviously, for not being here. But they did want me to pass along something that they wrote on behalf of the brothers. They were the brothers from another mother that I had. When we arrived on campus, I was 10 years old. And, this was a big move. We were coming from Calgary, and we'd had great experiences on the prairies. That's where I learned to skate and play hockey outdoors and did all kinds of things. And then we arrived here on the campus with the ocean, and these two boys were the same age as me, Brian a year older, Rory exactly the same age, 8 days apart. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So the three of us grew up together, and then David Ross arrived. Dave's back there. And the four amigos, the Brentwood brats, grew up on campus together and attended the school, and we had a great time. And they're still lifelong friends that I get to see when I come back. So this is on behalf of Rory and Brian and the Carr family, but we cannot think about Stephen Wynne without recalling the funny stories and events we were so fortunate to be a part of. From the first day we met the Wynnes, we gained a new brother in Mike, and our little sisters in Allison and Andrea. June and Stephen opened their door for Rory and Brian and often closed it with a boot attached to the farewells. The ski trips to Manning Park were legendary and usually ended with the same number of students returning as who left on the Friday, to Howard's story. Brian got to help chaperone a trip to the Calgary Olympic Games in 1988. One of the events we took the kids to was the men's downhill. Steve's planning of when we were to leave, yes, we missed the race. He wasn't the best at timing. However, as we were driving back down the mountain, he saw the new Olympic champion standing waiting for one of the buses. Steve got the bus driver to stop. He got off the bus, talked to the new Olympic champion, and the next thing you know, we are all off the bus and getting photos with this guy, making something awesome out of something that could have been negative. And you're right, he was always an optimist. There was always a silver lining. Stephen was our cross-country coach for the 5 years that we both attended Brentwood. Some of the great quotes: "You are tougher than they are. Get in behind them, stick with them, then push it on the hills." Stephen made running and competing fun. We loved representing the school, and he loved winning, something his teams did for a number of years. I, Brian, still run around the area where the old cross-country course was. I often think of those magical days of inter-house cross-country, an event the new school has never had the opportunity to participate in. Steve Wynne has left an indelible mark on the fabric of the school. Rory and I were with Stephen on the day before he passed. Yeah, they were the they were the last ones to visit with Dad in the garden, and they did what I couldn't do, and I really appreciated that. They had about an hour visit with Dad, and I really treasure that. He wanted to go for a drive that afternoon. There was still that mischievous twinkle in his eye, and he did not want to end this afternoon with us. To the Wynne family, thank you for opening your doors for Rory and I, Rory and me. Your dad was a big part of our lives and our time at Brentwood. All right, next. There's a theme here, obviously. Dear, dear friends of the Wynne family, the Holmes family, and Michael Holmes is going to make a few remarks.
Just adjust this a little bit. How's that? Just trying to keep time with Al there. I was reminded of my first band practice and how the next time I came, it was suggested I find another activity, not music related. My condolences first to the Wynne family and June, Frank and Eva, and Allison, Andrea, Michael, partners, Dave, Byron, grandchildren, Ryan, Kaylee, Olivia, Finn, Seth. I know your grandfather, father, husband was very, very proud of all of you, loved you very, very much. I'm very grateful to Brentwood for hosting this celebration of life, and honored to be invited to say some words about Steve. I have the privilege of knowing Steve and the family for almost 50 years. Steve was a very influential person in my life, and it's those formative years at Brentwood I wish to speak about primarily. I arrived as the youngest student in Brentwood in 1973 to Ellis House at the same time as Steve and June from Cochrane, Alberta. They had 3 children originally and quickly had more than 70. To be truthful, I don't remember much about those early days. I do recall a general sense of being in a warm and safe place despite my initial homesickness. They were, in retrospect, Steve and June, very kind and understanding. When you're a grommet, as we were called in grade 8, you're somewhat self-absorbed with one's troubles and challenges, and this, of course, continued throughout my school life and beyond. But reflecting back, it seems incredible to me how much Steve and June gave of themselves to ensure we all received the best education in and out of the classroom that we could. This is a trait shared by the Brentwood teaching staff and those in residence in particular. We were invited downstairs to their modest accommodations frequently, and a knock on the door always brought attention. I have to say that life under Steve was not always easy. He had a rather Presbyterian-like view of discipline and rules, no doubt, influenced by his own upbringing in Northern Ireland. That is to say, his philosophy was rules were not made to be broken, those who broke the rules were. He had a particular abhorrence of the burgeoning drug culture and also smoking. And Steve and his assistant housemaster, Robert Common, were feared by the smoking crowd for their forays at all times of day and night into the nooks and crannies of campus and its surrounds to out delinquents. My friend Todd Pritchard from Williams Lake quickly developed the habit of disappearing up Millbay Creek. Millbay was very different. in those days, and Brentwood was essentially in the middle of the wilderness. There was a beautiful pond and waterfall one could reach by walking up beside the creek, and it was a favorite smoking hole. Todd had the misfortune of being caught smoking in my company. Fortunately, I had taken a puff and disliked the effect, and so was not engaged in the same activity at the time of capture. Todd was rewarded with 6 of the best on the rear, and because of my absence, I was given a pass. This remains a sore spot between Todd and I. When I see him in Williams Lake, and I attribute it to good judgment and timing, he to cowardice and lack of team spirit. Not that I or most of the boys were a stranger to being beaten. It was a common practice for various offenses, but in reality, we didn't mind. Steve administered punishment rarely, quickly, and without malice. It was vastly preferable to doing extra homework, confined to quarters, or being made to run around B-field. This strictness applied to prep time, getting out of bed, going to sleep, daily room check, etc. In fact, we were all well regulated in accordance with clear rules, but it was always with kindness and love behind a strict exterior, and kept 60 young boys, all in various stages of homesickness, rebellion, and rejection of authority, somewhat under control. Steve, being a latecomer to campus, was assigned coaching duties. Well, everybody was, actually, but difficult to imagine today, but the school had roughly 300 boys and 11 rugby teams, and it was a mandatory activity except for those with more than one missing limb, in which case one might be confined to playing on the wing. Steve was in charge of the Fighting Fifths, and at times even the Slaughterhouse Six, a task some would have dreaded, but to which he took with his usual great enthusiasm. One might expect that in light of my previous comments, Steve would have been hard on his reluctant and unathletic charges. But the reverse is true, and as a coach, he was very kind, understanding, and supportive, as well as organized and diligent. And as a consequence, his players developed significantly in skill and confidence, to the point one year at least, they beat the Force, and I think even the Thirds. This is a source of great pride and joy amongst the players, I'm sure well remembered today. Steve also coached grass hockey and track and cross country. Ellis House quickly became the center of running as opposed to the rowing house of Whittle. Within a few years, the school started to win many of the inter-school competitions. Again, I'm struck in retrospect by the effort and passion Steve put into the program. Each week we'd have cross-country running training, and we would take trips to Maple Bay and Cowichan Bay and Victoria and elsewhere, Long Beach, as Howard alluded to run on wonderful farms and along the waterfront. Steve would always be with us, and of course was a very talented runner himself in his youth. The culmination was the inter-house cross-country. Again, a mandatory event, dreaded and reviled by much of the school population. But I think for most a challenge, it created what one used to call strength of character. When it came to participation in sports, Brentwood was the opposite of elitist. In public schools, it is usually only the creme de la creme of athletes who are invited to participate in competitive sports, whereas all Brentonians had to participate. As a result of this process, athleticism often developed at a later age, and Steve was one of those who believed in a latent ability of seemingly unathletic young boys discover their potential. From my own experience, this led me from an almost last place finish in grade 8 to winning the inter-house cross country at the end of my time. Though I have to say he did not inspire all of his charges. By example, my great friend Tony Arthurs ran afoul of Steve's archaic views on various matters, such as Steve's opinion that one should not take a cigarette break in the middle of the cross-country run and a shortcut to the finish line. Je souhaite dire un grand bonjour à Nora, la merveilleuse et très patient mère de Tony. That was my attempt at French, which I have failed miserably at school, but getting a little better. Steve also, as is mentioned, had a great talent for teaching. His favorite subject was geography. I'm not quite sure why. Perhaps it was his use of visual aids. But I and many others have a greater recollection of eskers, moraines, and glacial erratics than of any other subject in school. I'm just trying to remember one story that Howard reminded me of, which we went down to the USA for, I can't remember what it was for, but it was for a rugby tournament or something. We're all in a bus. There's about 20 of us in the bus, and this is the only time Steve ever got mad at me that I remember. And the custom guy comes on the bus, and he says, "Now, are you all from Canada?" And everybody's silently. And then I pipe up the back, and Steve goes, "Yes, yes." And I said, "Well, Steve, you're Irish." So there's about a 3-hour delay as they decided whether he was a member of the IRA. Wasn't very impressed. One last topic I would like to touch on, and that was Steve's competitiveness. This is most pronounced on the golf course. Despite a complete inability to hit a straight drive and preferring a chronic but reliable slice, he was a very canny competitor. To my regret, I was rarely, if ever, able to beat him, and I think I shared that desire to do so with his son, Michael, who, despite being a better golfer, was usually, like me and others, somehow psychologically beaten by the end of the game. His regular golfing partners would appreciate his annoying ability to tenaciously and inelegantly create a par or bogey from nothing, and his unrelenting and somewhat irritating optimism, together with his seemingly innocuous and helpful comments prior to you teeing off as, "There's an out of bounds on the left. A lot of people have gone in that lake today." I do have to say that sometimes his victories were aided by somewhat lengthy gimme putts. Of course, Steve's life was much more than Brentwood and his house students. He had a rich family life with many great friendships, and he loved June and his children and extended family greatly. I count myself among them, along with my family, who are here today, my partner Devine and brother Richard and Susan and son Alex, and the ones who couldn't be here today. He always made the greatest effort to keep in touch with us and my parents over the years. He was a wonderful influence in my life and countless others, and lived a true life with integrity and kindness and generosity without pretension. The last many years, he bravely and optimistically, again that word that many have used, struggled with cancer. I'm sure he had his dark moments, but I can never recall him complaining or dwelling on his own condition. Instead, he remained cheerfully interested in people and the world. That was the type of man he was. Steve was not a sentimental man, but he was Irish, so I will end with a couple of verses from Yeats's great poem, Innisfree. "I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree. And 9 bean rows shall I have there, and a hive for the honey bee. And I shall build a cottage there of clay and wattle made, and live alone in a bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of morning, where the crickets sing. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon's a purple glow, and evening's full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement gray, I hear it in a deep heart's core. I think about him often, and we will always miss him."
Keep putting this up and down. Thanks, Michael. Well, Dad loved being a papa, and he loved his grandchildren. And we have a short video, and Kaylee is going to speak on behalf of all the grandchildren. So Kaylee, do you want to come up? Kaylee's my daughter.
I worked on this little speech with my little cousin Olivia, the baby of the family, on behalf of all the grandkids. And to us, he was Papa. He was the life of every family event, the loudest one in the room, and our biggest cheerleader. He had nicknames for all the grandkids and truly brought out the best in us. Today, we want to share with you some wisdom Papa left with us. You always look cooler driving top down in a convertible. You must have sweeties on you at all times. Treat any person you meet like they could be a friend. How to have comedic timing. Family takes care of each other. A walk a day keeps you grounded. See as much of the world as you can in your lifetime. It's the best education you can get. You can never go wrong with a monochromatic outfit and high-knee socks. Nicknames make life more fun. He called my brother Ryan George. He called Olivia Gromit. He had ones for Andrea. I was always Kaylee Ann. You can build community around you no matter where in the world you end up. You can make a joke out of any situation, as you've heard. You're never too old for a nice hot chocolate. Always walk the golf course, overtaking a cart if you can. Always be proud of your Northern Irish roots. My best friends call me the Irish princess. It's crucial to know the difference between me and I. You cannot qualify the word unique. Always take the scenic route. Life can be short, so get on with it. And try to capture all the moments you can on film for family slideshows later on. One of our favorite things to do as a family. We have really been missing Papa these past 2 years, and will continue to miss his infectious energy and hugs. Forever thankful we won the lottery of Papas with him. He was more than a Papa, he was a friend, a best friend. Now I want to introduce a video that my brother Ryan made. Ryan and I got the privilege of going back to Northern Ireland with Dad and seeing Belfast with Nana and Papa, seeing where they grew up and where they met and where they went to university, and it was a real privilege. And some of those videos are from there, and you'll hear my laughter in a lot of them. He always kept us laughing, and we feel lucky that you get to see that side of him today. Thank you.
Don't poke that in my face every time I stop. I was at this school when I was 10 years old, 1948. And I was here for 8 years, till 1956. And then I went to Queen's University, Belfast in 1957.
How are you doing?
Oh, you want to know how I'm doing? I'm doing great. Never feel better. I tell you, it's just great to be out here driving with you guys in the car. And the big bonus, of course, you know, is I'm in the front seat and you guys are all crushed in the back.
Yeah, we know, we notice.
And that's the fun being crushed in the back, so nothing's going to change in the next week. Just pass that on to your friends, all right?
Now.
Boys are boys are boys. Boys are boys are boys are boys are boys are boys are boys.
You like this song?
Yes. Hope you like this music.
Are you gonna eat that snail? What do you think?
Weird.
I'm stuck in the elevator. Level 0. The power's out.
Power's out. No power, no TV.
No hockey game.
No hockey game. No life.
David Anthony, but still in spite of that, to my father I was William, while my mother called me Pat. Ho! When it's the biggest mix-up.
Hello to all of my girlfriends. Everyone knows about my bobby pin. Put it on the internet, kid.
Let's see.
Yeah, there we go. Lovely.
Keeping your hair nice?
Yes, keep my hair back.
You look like Chris Evans.
Papa.
What?
Pose.
Where's your shield?
Look out!
Oh no!
Is that how you do it?
Yeah.
Get away out of it.
Hey, Papa, can you say that? Wow, wow, wee, wow.
Wow, wow, wee, wow, wow.
Wow, wow, wee,
Wee,
wow.
wow, 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 wee, wow, wow.
Wow, wow, wee,
Why,
wow.
wee, wow, wow, why, wee, wow.
Very nice, I like.
Wee, wee, wee.
I have to pee so bad.
I feel like a pretzel.
Say bye.
Bye.
You're going first? Great job, Kaylee. Hours and hours of entertainment. Took them a long time to edit that because they had so much. You going first? Okay, now the tough part. The three of us are going to make a few remarks.
So I was here at the end. And we always say, oh, geez, I can do this, that he couldn't have orchestrated his end better, even if it was in his power. But he did always seem to get his way, and here we are again. So he would have been awful with COVID and masks and passports and all that stuff. So he got out of all that, but it meant leaving this for a couple years. But we're happy to be here now. We never wanted him to have a long time at the end. Nobody does, bedridden and suffering. But in one day, he went from social visits in the garden, as we heard, from
with the cars to his resting golf course in heaven with Bill and several other of his friends, all who should be speaking today. I can imagine the reunion, George and Peter and Clyde, right? And others that left too early. But people are always curious of dying people's last words. I was there, so I'll share. And it's very him. After staying steady all through his cancer treatments, he deteriorated quickly through that last day, and we believe through an internal bleed. And having a wonderful family FaceTime in the afternoon where we could see that he was going, he said all the right things, including things like live with no regrets, look after your mother, all those. He basically asked at one point to go to sleep. He looked over and he said, "Can I go now?" And we had a few words, and our friend down the street played taps on his bugle. It was at 7 o'clock when all the banging of pots and everything, and that has significance to us with camp. It's the first time it had ever happened. I was usually up at the house, and so it was a real, like, day is done, gone the sun, and it was incredible. So special time. Mom and I took turns watching him through the night, and at around 8:30, 9 o'clock, I went in to check on him, and he had been sleeping. We thought he would just kind of pass on, and he opened one eye. These are his last words, and he said, "Why am I not dead yet?" So his plan hadn't worked quite to perfection, because he thought he'd just turn over and go. But at around 3 a.m., he did drift off for good peacefully. Mom was right beside him in bed. And that's his final story, always with a bit of humor. But other folks have always been able to sum him up better than me. So I just want to read some quotes that I fully agree with, and as a family, we know what he's like. They're mostly from Brentwood kids. It's a theme as well. But one of my favorites was from Wade Pitts. I don't have the years written down. He was 89 or so. He said he could discipline with a look and inspire you with a smile. And it's so true. He did that as a father, too. I don't ever remember him having to raise his voice with us as kids. And Curtis Terry, one of Mike's friends, described him as wise, thoughtful, caring, and joyful person. I love it. Nick Brown, who's another close family friend from the school, he said, because of him, so many students at Brentwood were able to excel in their dreams from his teaching and support. And there were so many letters and cards. I obviously can't read them all, but then we really wouldn't be getting to our drinks. So we definitely won't do that. But I want to sum up with part of one letter that came from a student that experienced Dad in so many facets of Brentwood life. He's still little Robbie Dixon to me, but he's all grown up now, and Dad would be proud of his eloquence. Where are you guys? Oh, there you are. His mom's here. So Rob Dixon was 94. Mr. Wynne remains one of my favorite teachers and figures at Brentwood. Like many students, he taught me geography, cross-country, law, introduced many of us to faith via IV, and was a leader in Ellis House. When I think of Steve, many rapid fragments of memory spring to mind. The knee-high socks, colorful V-neck sweaters and tie, the wonderful writing script, his many Latin phrases enunciated with perfection, the cross-country runs through the farm fields, walks during the Long Beach Pacific Sands retreats, the IV bus trips, round trip from the school to the Fairbridge farm, his vocal support for all teams. He was a sportsman. During the rugby and field hockey games, his announcements at assemblies, and that distinct Irish accent saying things like, "It never rains in Barbados." Never. Although he still took his duffel coat. I can always still remember Steve taking our geography class at times to a common room to watch the VHS recordings of the great David Attenborough. I thought that was only Jerry Pennells that did that. Narrate a series or in a different setting, Steve encouraging me to run a little faster when I was slaving away on a long cross-country run. I mention all these tidbits to let you know Steve is a figure in my life that lives with me to this day, and one I will never forget. And I think there's tons of Brentwood students that would echo that. For Brentwood, Steve's impact on the school over several decades cannot be overstated. I last saw Steve in June 2018 over a pleasant glass or two. Steve and I had our last occasion to reminisce about our time together at the school. Looking back, I felt like a kid coming home from a long holiday back to a family member. There's the fellowship. It was pure joy and meant a lot to both of us. While close to the end of his life then, Steve still possessed that wonderful smile, the same sparkle in his eyes, and his customary dry wit and humor. Finally, perhaps the ultimate testament for anyone at the end of their life is that when looking back, you could say of them that they made a positive difference in someone else's life. To this end, Steve was a resounding success. And that was one of our last words too, where he said, I said, you touched a lot of lives. And he said, that's what we're put here to do. So I think I'll leave it at that.
I'm the middle child, so I will go second. I'm actually going to be quite brief, because Dad was quite succinct. He was not complicated. He was consistent. I could sit down and just say that. We've heard it throughout the day, how consistent he was over 50 years of, Brentwood, and over 50 years of marriage and fatherhood. He wasn't complicated. He was just consistent. I don't actually remember a time when he didn't have the ability to steady me. Through the ups and downs, he always reminded us, all of us, that wallowing wasn't going to change anything. He hated drama, for one thing, and he would just consistently simplify his advice to us as kids and his grandkids. And he says, keep your head down, chin up. Work hard, stay positive. Consistent message from Dad for all of us, I think. The friendships that he had. Robert Common, I don't know how many years, almost 50 years there as well. They write handwritten letters with Robert's art back and forth to each other. John Neal, who I know is watching from Northern Ireland, they wrote handwritten letters in Spanish back and forth to each other since. That's right. Only one of them spoke Spanish. It was impressive. They had Spanish nicknames for each other, and their friendship spans 60 plus years. And they did it consistently. As a teacher, he had consistently high standards. We do know our grammar in our house. And we have a little joke in our house in North Carolina that if we had 25 cents to put in a jar every time somebody on TV qualified unique, we would be very wealthy. You can't be quite unique or very unique. He was unique. As a dad, he was consistent. He showed up, all our events, early morning hockey, horseback riding at the Holmes family, whatever the sport was, whatever the event was, he was consistently there as a dad. He loved his golf buddies, consistently made time for Pog and Arbutus. He loved all the people who worked at the Ridge. We have a couple of his favorite servers here today. He could consistently made people feel special. No matter what your role, No matter, here on campus, he would spend as much time with the laundry ladies who used to live across the block from us to the headmaster. He didn't treat anybody any differently. I now have a sophomore, can't believe that I can even say that, who some of my proudest moments watching Olivia is when she leaves even a fast food restaurant and she turns around and says, "Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, chef." And it's totally Papa. And it's beautiful. I love that about you. So you could call it whatever you want. Optimistic, loyal, loving, funny, cheeky. It's still not complicated. He would just want us to love each other, make time for each other, be present when you're in a conversation, be fair, and be consistent. Love you, Dad.
Hey. Well, that's what I've been saying for 2 years. I'll try not to be too much longer than the girls, but hopefully keep it brief. Dad's last joke to me was this: what's the definition of torture? A beautiful, gorgeous, pristine, perfect golf course in heaven, but there's no golf balls. So it's no coincidence what I'm going to talk about has run through this whole afternoon. Everybody's remarks, I think everybody thinking and feeling in their mind, looking back on how they knew Dad and the connection that they had to him. There are 5 themes that I identified 2 years ago when we thought we were doing this earlier, and when I started thinking about what I would say. And I'll try not to dwell on all of them because, as I said, there's this common thread through all of our connections, through the family, through the friends, through colleagues, everybody, alumni. But I identified these 5 attributes, themes in Dad's life that I've taken into my own life, and that's why I talk about them. So the first one, in no particular order, is his sense of adventure. So we've all heard today how he loved to travel, how his sense of curiosity and adventure was so dominant in his life, and maybe even a bit frustrating for Mom. We're going where? But all 3 of us and the grandkids have adopted that love of travel, that love of adventure and curiosity. He was a preemie, as Frank talked about. He entered this world. He was pretty anxious, I guess, to get into this world. And I guess he was so curious, he wanted to get in and find out what he could do and what he could accomplish. And obviously, we're so thankful that he made it. But he was, I guess he's in an incubator for a few weeks. There is also a reason why he was a geography teacher, and in particular, a physical geography teacher. He loved learning, and he loved talking about the history of the earth and how things developed and how things, were the way they were. And again, someone else, I think Michael or Howard talked about how we could draw the world map in chalk on the blackboard freehand. And it certainly amazed the students that he taught, and it certainly amazed me when I would see it. And he was my geography teacher. Luckily, it was my best subject. Rosie has talked about, going to New Zealand and traveling with me as a baby, and our adventures in Ireland and anywhere we went. And it's definitely stuck with me. I love to travel. I'm a curious person myself. I love exploring new cultures, and Dad definitely instilled that in me. Our family holidays were precious, wonderful memories. We always have slideshows. Kaylee talked about that. And we always look back on those slideshows of our family holidays. And being a teacher, we would have a couple of months off in the summer. And when you could camp on Long Beach, we would go out there and spend literally a couple of months camping on the beach, and best times of our lives. The second one is dedication. And again, this is repetitious, but you've heard this theme talked about today. He was dedicated in his own young life as a cross-country runner, in his athletics in particular. Obviously, he must have trained very hard to be as accomplished as he was. And as Frank said, he never really bragged about it. I saw pictures. I knew that he was a very, very good runner. And John Neal is watching, and he was one of his colleagues and competitors. But he never was boastful about it. He just did it, and then he continued to do it in his adult life, partly for fitness, but partly because he loved it so much. He also loved coaching, so he was dedicated to his coaching. Again, we heard from Michael, the Fighting Fifths and the Slaughterhouse Sixth. I think they were the only teams that had nicknames, and Dad took so much pride in coaching them, taking little talent, but making it fun. And again, there are still students who talk about those days when they were forced to play rugby. They didn't want to, but Dad made it fun, and they look back on it fondly. His dedication to his craft. He was an extremely dedicated teacher wherever he taught. Didn't matter if it was Ireland, Cochrane, Chestermere, but he certainly loved Brentwood. He loved this place. He loved what he did. He said in the video he would have done it for free. And he always wanted to be better, but he always wanted his students to enjoy the learning process. And I think that's what he kind of gave to us as well. In my profession, I do a lot of courses, a lot of upgrading of knowledge and credentials, and I always think, Dad's in the back of my mind, enjoy it, embrace it, and I do. He was obviously dedicated to his family. One example of his dedication that I've taken into my life just this past winter, Dad was tobogganing with us in Cochrane, and he tore ligaments. He stuck his leg out to slow us down, and there was a crust of ice on the top, and his leg basically went backwards, and he tore ligaments. I was less than 10 years old, probably 8 or 9 years old. I don't really remember it that well, but what I do remember is him doing rehab. I remembered him doing his exercises, doing his weights and strengthening, whatever the physiotherapist was telling him, because he knew to get back to his activities that he loved, he had to do that. I hurt my back in October. I had a herniated disc, and I always had Dad in the back of my mind when my chiropractor or my physiotherapist was telling me what to do. If you want to get back playing golf, if you want to get back to your normal activities, and we're not getting any younger, you got to do these exercises every day. And Dad was there on my shoulder giving me that little prod when I didn't feel like doing it or it hurt too much. Get it done today, tomorrow's another day, do it tomorrow, and then I'm better. I'm playing golf again, and I know that that's something that I remembered. He was also dedicated to fighting his cancer, and we've heard about that today. I won't dwell on it because I'll probably start crying, but he was dedicated to the process of fighting it as long as he could. He knew the end was at some point, but he was dedicated to that fight. The third one is friendship. And really, this goes without saying. I'm not going to elaborate on this. This is why we're all here. We have family here. We have colleagues here. We have a lot of friends that he touched, just people that he knew at the golf club, in the community, at the church. But he nurtured friendship. And that's what I'd like to particularly point out that I've also taken into my life. Friendship can be fleeting. Friendship can be less than solid. And friendships can come and go. But what Dad instilled in me, and I think the girls too, is for true friendship, you've got to put the energy forth. And you've got to develop it and nurture it. Just like a garden, whatever other analogy you want to use. And he did that. That's why he's so well remembered today and why so many people are here today. He nurtured and he took care of those friendships and he valued them. And I do the same. I've got friends that I've seen. One friend I've seen since I've been out here of 40 years. And I hope I have friendships for, the rest of my life as well that I have from my childhood and from university days. The fourth one is faith. He was a man of faith. We all know that. And he lived his life with the Lord and faith first and foremost. And he was an example of the Christian life. He was a great example of it. He had a leadership position in his church, and he took that very seriously. He was an elder, and he touched a lot of people's lives, and he counseled a lot of people, and really took that role seriously, and I believe was incredible at it. He was always there for others, unconditionally. Didn't expect anything back. Wasn't this quid pro quo thing. Somebody needed him, he was there. And that's another thing that I've taken into my life. Don't expect anything back. Just do it because it's the right thing to do. His faith gave him strength when he was battling his cancer. He knew where he was going. He wasn't scared of it. And that got him through a lot of the pain and difficulty. Right to the very end, when he told us he wasn't afraid of going that night. And last but not least, family. He was a family man. He was a devoted father, papa, of his immediate family and extended family. And he valued that so much. He loved having his grandkids around, even though they tormented him. But he got so much joy out of it. And I would say that my dad probably liked putting a smile on someone's face more than anything. If he could give you a little joke, little Irishism, something to put a smile on your face, that made him happy. Our last FaceTime call, as Andrea talked about, was very special. It was with the whole family. We were able to get everybody on it. He was able to say goodbye. He was able to say he loved us and that he had no regrets. And that's how we all want to go. I admire Dad a lot. I took a lot from his life, and and what he did in his life, and I've tried to instill that in my own life. And that's really what a father should do. That's what I'm trying to do. So, Dad, we miss you, and we're here to celebrate you, and it's been a great afternoon. That ends the formal part of the afternoon. There's one more thing I got to do, right? The Irish blessing? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I made it through that, and then... Okay. Thank yous. On behalf of the families, on behalf of the family, I'd like to thank the Brentwood kitchen and catering staff, the Brentwood operations and IT staff, Bud Patel, head of school, Brentwood. Thank you, Bud. John Allpress for his contributions. Tracy Arden and Don Cowan and Lauren Yannick. Thank you all. And the last thing, I need my iPad. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. We are going to have some refreshments back there. The live feed will end here with the formal part being over. Thank you all for attending on the online and virtually. Hope you enjoyed it. The last thing I'm going to end with, fitting for Dad, is the Irish blessing. And then we can have a Guinness or a glass of wine or whatever else is out there. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Amen.